Welcome back to the channel. It's Roberto with Full Crow Precision. Well, we're still in the process of getting things going, but hey, that's okay. That's life. But at least I'm getting back up and going. For the most part, our move's gone pretty well. We're finishing up, cleaning up the other property, making it all spick and span. You know, it's nice to get a deposit back, all right? Security deposits. So that's what we're working on. At least it wasn't that far, but, it takes time. So, with that said, here we go. Here's a question. If you had your choice of a cartridge that you could shoot really well, and you're going to take it for an all-around cartridge, you're talking about you're using this for deer, elk, some pronghorn, potentially moose, what groups of cartridges or what select few cartridges would you like to take? And I'm going to give you my list. This is just my list. And then I'm going to give you some that I know that are popular for very good reason. And then the type of loadings I would go with in each one. So basically, if you're going to pick a do-it-all cartridge, depending on what you're trying to hunt, most of all, where you're spending most of your time and see where things kind of cross over, here's the good ones. Now, we're going to go from in different categories. So we're going to go from really mild, low recoiling, easy for anyone to shoot, up to larger cartridges into the magnums. And we're going to cover a variety, and we're going to talk about different bullet types. And so we're going to start from the small, and we're going to work our way up. So on the small end, for my personal minimum, what I think would be a great starting point for a do-it-all cartridge, I wouldn't go any less than a 6.5 Creedmoor if you're going to be crossing over between deer, pronghorn, mule deer, and elk. And mind you, let's say you live somewhere else, fallow deer, axis, going into red deer. Yes, a 6.5 Creedmoor will indeed kill that, but you also need to, be very selective. So you don't want to go with the heavier bullets at the slower velocities. You need to get them up there a little bit better and keep your ranges reasonable. The last thing you want to be doing is wounding an animal. You want to kill it. So you're going to want to choose a bullet construction that's capable of sinking deep and not falling apart. So if you're going to be looking at that, something like the 130 grain terminal ascents, there's some sort of monolithic bullets that you can use in the 6.5 Creedmoor. Also, you're going to want it, or you can go with like a Nosler partition. Push those grains up a little bit heavier and load them a little hotter. Maybe you don't have the chance to reload. Well, make sure that whatever you're getting, make sure it's going to do the job and trick on the animal. And since you are using a smaller cartridge that's also relatively slower compared to a lot of other cartridges, you want to make sure you're keeping your ranges reasonable. You want to make sure that there's adequate velocity on your game when it hits. So probably even though there's some really good shooters out there that can make something happen with them, but I wouldn't take a 6.5 Creedmoor on a large bull elk anywhere past 350 yards. That's about it. You don't want to really push it too much. Maybe 400 if you have really good conditions. But the thing is, you're starting off at a relatively slow velocity. I will go with this. If you're going to go with a 140 or 143 grain, go with a normal Bond strike or a 142 Nosler AccuBond long range. Stay away from the ELDX and the ELDMs. You can get away with those on smaller game. It's just really not ideal compared to a Bond strike when it comes to a larger game, sinking through that that tough hide, the muscle mass, and the bone. You're going to get better penetration and a better wound channel with something that's going to be in the bonded category or a monolithic category than you will with a more cup and core style bullet. So that's a good starting point, and yes, many have taken game with that, and you can throw the 6.5 PRC in there as well. And the reason why is because it's literally the same bullet selection. You're throwing it a little faster, so that's good. And if you're loading into more heavy duty 26s, like 6.5 by 300 Weatherby, 6.5 Weatherby RPM, 264 Win Mag. Get those. Even then, get your velocities going. Your 6.5 PRC, 26 Nosler. The thing is also when you're trying to, but the other thing too is typically kind of think about this too. You want to be able to comfortably shoot it. You want to be able to practice a lot. So if you're wanting a little bit more velocity, you want to be able to shoot it comfortably and be able to practice often enough without going broke in the process. Your 6.5 Creedmoor and your 6.5 PRC are going to be better options than a 264 Win Mag, a 6.5 by 300, or a 6.5 Weatherby RPM. Now, if you have the finances to go after the others, sure, great. But just fair warning, those faster cartridges are going to have a little bit of a struggle keeping some tighter groups because they might get too overbore for the diameter. Stepping it up, this is where my personal minimum is when it comes to what I choose, and that's going to be your 27s. And I'm going to kind of clump 27s and 28s in the same because they kind of fill that void of a perfect medium where they will do everything, and they have virtually identical wound channels. So we're going to go with 270 Winchester. Now, if you're going to start with a 270 Winchester, that's a great medium. It's not too much in the recoil. You can find rifles pretty easily. Ammunition options are pretty affordable. There's a good option all through there. But, you're going to want to stick with your heavier end of bullets. Instead of going, if they go 120 or 130, push it up into 140, 145, 150. There's even as high as a 160 grain Nosler partition that you could use. Do you need that? No. As a matter of fact, I would probably stick with a 150 grain Nosler AccuBond or not as a Nosler AccuBond long range. That's currently what I'm personally using. My rifle really likes them, so I'm going to stick with those. I am going to be doing some load testing here, though, at some point with the 140 grain Sierras and the 136 grain Terminal Ascents. And again, you want to stay reasonably closer. You don't want to go... I wouldn't take it past 500. Now, even with my personal load, which I'm pushing hot, and it's still keeping tight groups, I'm getting about 2950 feet per second with that Nosler AccuBond long range. According to my reloading data that I've been able to look up in the charts, yes, it is ethical to take shots on an elk out to 500 yards. Do I personally have the desire to do that? Absolutely not. I think if you're going to be shooting past 400, you should really be getting into larger cartridges, like a 6.8 Western. And the advantage of something like a 6.8 Western is that you can push your bullet weights up to like a 175. Now, I'm going to give the caveat of mine that I'm working on, my cartridge design. It is not ready, but the thing is, this is where the happy medium where it would fill in as well, because it gives you the benefits of a 270 Winchester and a 6.8 Western. So it would allow you to be able to kind of fit right in between those, where you can have a cartridge that has similar recoil to that of a standard 270, the cost of a standard 270, but it would allow you to push those bullets up into that 175 grain range. So once we get the new tooling in, and be able to get that all done and set up and everything else too, then we're going to be able to get some proper load data, which I will be happy to supply. But at the same time, the plan is to make it to market with that. Now, stepping into your 28s, which again, your 27s and your 28s are really close. So you're going to have ones like 7mm 08. Now that's going to be a really good one because it's going to give you a lot of similar recoil to that of the um, 6.5 Creedmoor and 308, but it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be better in terms of energy than the 6.5 Creedmoor will. And we're going to, again, keep the ranges reasonable. We're talking like 400 yards. So you can actually push it because you can get a little bit heavier bullet. You can get the 140s, the 150s, even up into a 160. And again, you're going to have pretty similar velocities, actually a little bit better velocities than the 6.5 Creedmoor. And again, like a 150 grain AccuBond would be absolutely ideal for a 7mm 08 because you're going to get good velocities and that bullet's going to be tough, so it's going to be able to punch through and do a good job. And then you're going to also be able to carry that over into something like a 280 Remington. Now, 280 Remingtons are kind of tricky because rifles are not easy to get. And really, the ammo isn't all that common anymore either. Now, one that is basically the same but better is the 280 Ackley Improved, and yes, that's starting to get more traction and is easier to find rifles in and ammunition in than the 280 Remington. Is it the best cartridge? I'm not gonna say it's the best cartridge. What I will say is one of the best balanced cartridges. That's where the sweet spot comes in. It's not that it's necessarily the best at elk. It's just that it's a very balanced cartridge. And that's kind of where you want to be. The 270, mine that I'm working on, the 27 Ibex, and then the 280 Ackley are going to be in that sweet balance of good bullet diameter, good weight selections, and not too much in the recoil that are going to do the trick. But again, here's the caveat. The 280 Remington and the 280 Ackley Improved are not the best budget friendly options available. They're just not. It's not that they're not good. It's just that they can get pricey, especially when it comes to your rifles, and then your components for reloading. And then it's even more money if you're just buying factory. That is improving, but it's still considerably more money than 270 and 30-06. That's actually another good one in that medium range. On the higher end of the medium range is going to be your 30-06. You can do just about everything you want with a 30-06, and that you're going to have a hard time beating that. Anywhere in the 165 to 180 grain range, it absolutely ideal. Just make sure it's in a really good construction bullet. Winchester's loads, and you can do these in hand loads because there's the 168 grain Nosler AccuBond long range. There's a 165 grain Nosler AccuBond. I can't remember the weight on the Sierra, not on the Sierras, but the Barnes. The Barnes like TSX, TTSX, those mono metal bullets, those are really good for that purpose. But again, you're going to keep your ranges pretty reasonable and you want to load them as hot as you can while still shooting good groups. Now, more in the medium bore, of course, the tried and true, one of the most popular and still is never going to be replaced, the 7mm Remington Magnum. That's a great one because you can go from like a 140 up to like a 170 grain bullet. 150 to 170 is about the sweet spot for elk. And so, yeah, same thing. You're 500, 600 yards without too much issue if you're a good shooter. But it's going to have a tremendous impact on elk. So and it's not too bad to shoot. The ammunition costs are not that bad. Actually, oftentimes rifles and ammunition are cheaper than the 280 Ackley Improved. So there's that. And you can shoot them pretty reasonably well with either suppressor or brake. Now, I heard this thing about, if you have a brake, it can oftentimes create a ton of flinch. I've never personally had that happen. I'm not saying it can't, but if you're going to have these larger rifles, the Magnums, you're going to want some sort of muzzle device, whether it's a brake or a suppressor. I personally like the brakes, but that's just me. And then this brings us into, I forget, there's others, 28 Nosler, but that's a hammer of a cartridge. Very expensive ammunition. It's not terribly difficult to find rifles. And then you're going to have your 7 PRC. Whether it's your 7 Rem Mag, your 7, your 7 PRC, or your 28 Nosler. Are there others? Yes, but we're trying to talk about ones. You can go out and buy a rifle, buy ammunition. In your Magnum 28s, I'm gonna give it to the 7 Rem Mag and the 7 PRC. They're right there with each other. You're not gonna see much of a performance difference of them on elk, so much within reasonable hunting ranges. Even for target shooting, you're not going to see too much of a difference until you're getting out there past 1,000 yards. So that all said and done, all those are really phenomenal options. And then I'm going to go up to the 30s, and you got to go with the tried and true 300 Win Mag. It's hard to beat the 300 Win Mag. It's done everything under the sun. And you can load them up to 200 plus grain bullets, but the thing is, you want to maintain some velocity, so you don't really want to be exceeding 200 grains. 180s to 200s are like perfect for that cartridge. And it's kind of the same thing when it comes to the PRC, the 300 PRC. You don't want to go so heavy that you're losing too much velocity. I know BC makes up for a certain amount of velocity loss, but at the end, you want to try to also, excuse me, I had a weird burp there. You want to maintain a good velocity from the get-go, because no matter what anyone wants to say, velocity trumps BC 10 out of 10 times. So you can combine them. If you got a good balance of both high velocity and high BC, man, you are set. There's a balance between it. You don't want to go too crazy. There are other 30 calibers you can get in there. 300 Weatherby Magnum would be one. The 3378 Weatherby. There's the 30 Nosler. 300 Short Magnum. There's the 300 H&H. Yeah, that's not one you hear often, but also a really good option. And then, you're going to go into your larger, your medium bore. You're getting into ones like your 338 Win Mag. You could use the 35 Wellen quite successfully on elk. It is a great cartridge. I wouldn't use it past 250 yards because it's typical. BCs are pretty low. But you're going to get adequate velocities and energies out of it that you can absolutely hammer any bull elk or bull moose within 250 yards. No problems. And then there's your absolute kings of it. You're going to talk about your 375 H&H and your 375 Ruger. But here's the thing. Do you really need that? No. Is it nice? Sure, but man, are you going to get pounded with that thing. So, your ones that are going to be more affordable. Oh, and I forgot to mention in the 30 cal, it wasn't intentional, the 308 Winchester. Great cartridge. It really is. And I will throw out another short one that I kind of forgot is starting to gain a little bit more traction again. Because honestly, it should have had better traction all the way, from the beginning. The 338 Federal. Tremendous cartridge. And I'll throw in another oddball that not many know about, the 358 Winchester and the 35 Remington. That's actually mostly for lever guns. But, there's some really good old school cartridges out there that you could use and as long as you're using them inside reasonable ranges with good weights and good bullet construction, you can absolutely use them phenomenally and successfully on whitetail, bear, and elk. So there it is. These are some cartridges. But I'm going to say this again, and I've said this many times. Your top 5 out of all those that I just mentioned are going to be your 308, 30-06, 270, 7 Rem Mag, and 300 Win Mag. And the reason is because they are far more effective on versatility than your smaller bores like your 26s and your 25s and your 24s. And they're pretty affordable to get. They're common. Every manufacturer chambers in those cartridges. And ammunition is available everywhere, and there's a huge variety of each for you to be able to choose from. And it won't break the bank in the process. And for the most part, most people can shoot all those pretty well. You start getting into the 300 Weatherby and up, and then you're really starting to take a lot more recoil than most people desire. So those are the things that I've observed in having conversations with others. But I'm going to tell you this. If you're looking to do that, I'll put it this way. If you're like me, where you're spending more time hunting medium game than you are hunting larger game, you're going to have a hard time passing up on something like a 270 or 7mm 08. Those are going to be phenomenal. Those are like your bread and butter because they're going to do really well on your medium game, and they're going to allow you flatter shooting than your 30 cals. But again, you can find some really good loads and take those on your larger game. As long as you get your good practice, choose the right bullet type, and keep your ranges reasonable. So basically, as long as you're not an idiot, you can absolutely use any of those and be successful on elk. So that's all I have for tonight. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, and we'll talk to you again.